Great, you do it then.
Yeah. I got it recording. All right. So, is there any other thing on your screen that says?
It says it's recording.
Oh, that's good. Does it say like start webinar or anything like that?
No, it says there are 15 participants so far.
Oh, yeah, there they are. Yeah,
increasing.
Okay.
So,
all right, so they can see and hear us.
Says, yeah, they hear us.
All right, good. Yeah, sometimes there's a waiting area where all the attendees kind of sit in limbo until you click a start button. But
right,
we don't have that now. So good, audio looks good.
So we'll just wait until.
We'll wait till the start time.
Yeah.
So nobody misses it, or they got 4 minutes. And then I can go over the ground rules, and I get the Q&A window open so I can refer to stuff.
In fact, we might want to just wait a couple minutes after the hour, because I bet you a lot of people think, oh, it doesn't start till 1, so I can't. I can see a lot of people thinking I can't click the join button until exactly 1 o'clock.
Well, if they've ever been to my webinars, they know that's not true. But I mean, it can't hurt. We got plenty of time. So. My beard's getting scraggly, Jeff. It's only been 2 weeks.
I shaved this morning.
I might have to shave it. I figured I'd leave it for this last thing where people are seeing my face, because I have had a beard for so many years, and then it'll probably come off this weekend. And I'm going to look like I'm 22.
That's what Greg looked like. He shaved his beard really close before, thinking, weeks before the conference, thinking we're still doing the conference. And man, it's like he looked like a teenager. By the way, in case we need a back channel, I have Teams running on my iPad. So,
all right. Well, then I did have our Wi-Fi blip out on me twice so far today. So FYI on that. It was just for a split second, but that could be enough to boot me out. I do have a backup that I can switch to my phone if needed.
Do you mean FY-Fi?
No, I didn't mean that.
You didn't mean that? Okay, just checking. Javier is reminding us that we're live.
We know. This is behind the scenes casual conversation.
That's right. This is where we do the, this is where the, what do they call it? The stuff they put the outtakes. Where do the outtakes come from?
Carol's telling me I need to keep the beard. I don't know. Maybe I should have set up a poll ahead of time for that.
I think you should totally do the ZZ Top thing.
Like grow it out?
Yeah,
half and half? Long. Like just shave half the face? So depending on which profile?
No. Just grow it out really long. I watched the ZZ Top documentary on Netflix last weekend. It was really, really good.
I did watch that as well. I enjoyed that. I'm not a huge ZZ Top fan. But
I'm not a huge fan either, but in the band I play in, we play 2 ZZ Top songs, 2 or 3. We do I'm Bad, I'm Nationwide, and we do Jesus Just Left Chicago, and we do, what's the one that they always do with Jesus Just Left Chicago?
It sounds like you're picking their 70s songs. I'm not.
Yeah, well, there's 2 songs that they always do together. And when they play them on the radio, they're always played together as well. They just play one and go right into the other. Actually, Jesus Just Left Chicago is the second one. So what is the first one? Anyway, I wasn't a big ZZ Top fan. In fact, the song I'm Bad, I'm Nationwide, when I was, younger and listening to the radio, where they didn't always announce every song, right? So you didn't necessarily know what the name of the song was. I assumed from what I heard that the song was called I'm Bad, I'm Asian White. That's what I heard. So that's what I thought the song was called. Yeah. Turns out, no, it's not called that. And when you think about it, that makes sense. But see, today you just Google things and you can instantly find out what the name is. So there you go.
Yeah, and it's definitely easy to find like song lyrics that you misheard all your life. And now
gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times you looked up a song and said, oh, that's what they were saying in that song? Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we're going to wait just a minute or so longer, and then we'll get started. Yeah, I'm sure the people at Nationwide Insurance were really upset that the song starts with "I'm bad, I'm Nationwide." Because see, if it didn't say that, they could license that song for their commercials.
You're always thinking about that stuff.
Always thinking. Oh, hello, Gino. Okay, well, it is 1:01, and and Dirk as well. Hello, Dirk. So why don't we? Should we get started, Paul?
Yeah, we can get started. You know, people can continue to filter in, and they'll get the gist of what's going on. So the way this is going to work is this is our Q&A. Geoff put both of our names on here, but really Jeff's going to be answering questions. I'm kind of like going to be the moderator.
Well, you're the Q and I'm the A.
That's okay. There we go. I'm the Q because I will take your questions. I will ask them to Geoff, and then Geoff will answer them.
It really should have been live Q&A with Paul Lefevre and Geoff Perlman, because you're the Q and I'm the A.
Well, something to improve for next time.
That's right.
So the process is for the questions, you need to type them into the Q&A window. So if you have Zoom open on your Zoom app on the bottom, you might have to move the mouse to show the bottom toolbar. On the Zoom app, there's a button that says Q&A. You want to click that. That opens the Q&A window where you can type your questions. You can go ahead and type questions at any time. I'll have the full list here in front of me. I will pick questions to read to Geoff for him to answer. Make your questions good. You know, any question that starts with when are we going to do something? Yeah, we're not likely to answer that. So I'm not likely to ask
or even ask it.
Right. I'm not likely to ask it of Geoff. So, you know, ask good questions that, you know, thought-provoking, get the Geoff ponder look going. Feel free to use a chat window to talk amongst yourselves, but I won't be looking in there for questions. So put your questions in the Q&A window. All right, so to start off, there are already some stuff in here. So let me just make this window a lot bigger if I can. Actually, I'm not sure Zoom lets me do that. Nope, just lets me drag around the screen. All right, guess I'll be doing lots of scrolling here.
Okay.
All right, so we'll start with the first question here. This seems like a softball one to get things going. So this is from Dirk, and he's asking what kind of Mac you're using. In the Keynote video, the Mac was very fluent and smooth, and he has trouble with the same results. So he's wondering how you were.
Well, it's a 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro with 16 cores. So that's the reason.
16 cores for doing a Keynote. That probably is enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's my main computer. I only have one Mac. I mean, I don't have lots of computers, so it's my main machine.
All right, here's a question. This is from Martin, and it's somewhat related to stuff we've talked about at past XDCs, but I don't think was specifically mentioned in your video. And it says, you didn't say anything about interrupts and plugins in your video, but do you have anything you might be able to comment on about those?
Well, they're still on the roadmap. We didn't have any new information, so we didn't want to, I didn't want to really talk about them because I didn't want to go over something we went over last year at the Keynote. So, yeah, if I had something new, but the status hasn't changed. They're still on the roadmap. There's still something we very much intend to do. They still have tremendous utility. And in terms of the interrupts, we've actually done a lot of work on those. They're just not, quite ready to demo. So That's
So
what's
it's
going
more
on.
of you were talking about stuff that's perhaps more imminent, maybe.
Yeah. We're really trying to focus on things that are in the short term rather than long term.
All right. Christian is asking if you might provide a little more color on plugins for iOS. I like using that phrase. I've heard that in Apple.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what else to say other than you'll be able to utilize the plugin SDK to write plugins for iOS the way you do for Windows and Linux and Mac now. It's the same plugin SDK you're expecting to be using. It's just going to be, this isn't anything different. In other words, it's just we now support the kind of plugins we have for other platforms. We now support for iOS.
Right, and we do have stuff of our own that is kind of in plugin format, and some of that stuff is moving over to iOS. So it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah. So it's just plugins. There's nothing particularly special about them. It's just they're now for iOS. And for those of you who don't know, maybe you're, if you're new to iOS in the last few years, originally Apple didn't support plugins. You couldn't load shared libraries basically. So now they support that, and so now we can do plugins.
All right, question here from Jim regarding the worker class. Is the percent of CPU and number of cores runtime configurable?
It is, but we're expecting that most people will never change those. You'll just leave the default settings. We believe that's the sweet spot. The reason you'd want to change it would be if you're, by the way, the number of cores will be calculated by the framework. So it's not like I set it to 14 or whatever it was set on in the demo video. The framework calculates that number for you based on how many cores your machine has. So the only reason you'd want to change those numbers is if you knew your app was running on a machine that, like, let's say you had a machine that was doing a lot of really intense work and you didn't want it to always be taking up, all this available CPU. You wanted it running in the background. You wanted it to run on cores when they're available, but you for some reason only wanted to use 25% of the CPUs. In that case, you might change them, but 99% of users will probably never touch those two parameters, but they are configurable at runtime.
All right. Another question here from Dirk. Will Android have layouts for tablets too? Geoff might pass that off to me. But
I think I'll pass that off to Paul. Paul?
At this point, we are not expecting tablet layouts in the first release. We are focusing on phone, mostly because Android tablets are very, very low in market share. It's not like the iPad or anything like that. So we want to try and get the phone stuff where most people will be using first.
I bought an Android tablet a couple of years ago, and now I use it as a serving tray.
I also have an Android tablet here somewhere.
Yes, somewhere. That's the word I would use to describe. It's here somewhere.
Yeah, I really have no idea where it is. All right, let's see here. Trying to skip around the people so I get different people here, and I'll jump back. All right, a question from Gino, again about the multiprocessing worker stuff. Will there be a system to push status reports to the main process, for example, for progress bars?
There isn't at the moment. Basically what happens is that you job requested fires, that event fires, and that's a console app asking for a job, and you pass data to it. The job run event is the event that's actually executing in the console app. And when the console is done with a job, it then passes data back through job completed. So there really isn't another event. In theory, we might add an event you could fire, a progress event. I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that. I'd suggest making a feature request for that. And I wanted to clear up something too, just to make sure it's clear, is the console apps do not quit automatically when they're done. In other words, they'll sit and wait for another job to become available. They'll request another job. So if you know you're finished with all of them and you're done processing all your data, there's a stop method you call, and that will tell all of the consoles to stop. They'll quit at that point. If you quit your app, they'll quit because the IPC socket will go down, and that tells the apps to the console apps to quit. And if your app crashes, there is a ping sort of mechanism that'll be in there that'll where the console apps will say, "Hey, I haven't heard from the master app in a while," and it'll ping to see if the master app's still there, and if not, it'll quit. So yeah, that's a little bit more background on how all that stuff works.
All right, question here from Ed, maybe. The name's a little run together, but it says, talking about load balancing under Xojo Cloud, will this work with other type of hosts?
No, we're putting our own load balancer in front of your apps. So it's not built into your app or anything like that. Xojo Cloud will have, your app will be in front of a load balancer, or rather your load balancer will be in front of your app. This will allow you to do things like go to the Xojo Cloud control panel and say, hey, my users have been reporting that it's getting sluggish, so I'll just click a button to say I want 3 instances of the app instead of 2 or something like that, and then it'll spread out the load between them. In Greg's video, which I think is up now, he talks about how we're planning on, not for the initial release, but we're planning on having some sort of inter-process communication, so that, or I guess you'd say inter-application communication, so that different instances of the apps can talk to each other. I don't think too many users are going to need that, because apps tend to, behind a load balancer, tend to be kind of atomic. But anyway, yeah, so that's how that's going to work. Eventually, I'm hoping we'll be able to allow you to even move away from having to indicate how many apps you need. And someday you'd be able to just say, all right, I want the average latency or something to be this, and have it automatically figure out how many apps to launch. But anyway, to answer the original question, that's something that's going to be on Xojo Cloud.
All right. I'm trying to jump between. There's a lot of questions about the worker, so I don't want to do those all bunched together. I'm going to spread things out. So Gillis here has a question regarding the debugger. Do we have any plans regarding improving the debugger?
I knew that was your name, Ed. Paul didn't, but I did. Anyway.
Did I miss one? Oh,
no.
It was Ed.
Okay,
yeah. It, it was all in lowercase, so I wasn't sure if it was a name I was not knowing, or if it really was just Ed.
This is the advantage of the fact that I actually review every order comment that comes through. So people are surprised I do that, but I know most of our, well, not most, but I know a lot of our users' names as a result of that. So.
There you go. All right, so back to Gillis, it looks like here, do we have plans to improve the debugger, in particular the variables display pane on other IDEs? There's watch variables, and this is an example of something he'd like.
So I was literally just this morning talking to William about us doing some cosmetic changes to the debugger, for specifically the variables pane. Yes, watch points and all that kind of stuff. We definitely want to do that. It's not super high on the priority list because we've got some fairly big other items we have to do first. It's all a matter of bang for the buck, right? And the debugger isn't low bang for the buck, but there are just other bigger bang for the buck things in front of it, I guess is what I would say. But I feel your pain, because it would be great. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into my code and put in an if statement with a break to basically create my own watch point, right? And that's not really quite a watch point, but it's the closest thing I can get to it. So.
All right, question here from Martin. This is an interesting one that comes up in feedback a bit, so it might be good to bring up here. Is there a reason why with API 2.0 we haven't changed the type of the areas parameter in the paint event of Canvas to be to go from real basic rect to just regular rect?
Oh, that's.
You can pass that on to me if you want.
I will. I'll pass that on to you, Paul. Paul?
All right, let's take that one. All right, well, the reason is, unfortunately, somewhat related to the reason why we reverted many of or all of the event naming changes. Changing a parameter in an event does break things.
Makes backward compatibility not possible.
Yeah, so changing the data type like that, even though it has the same name of rect, it's technically a different class, and it would break things subtly. And But so that's why we haven't done that yet.
Yeah. But having said that, we are as you saw in my video, we are planning on introducing a new set of desktop control classes. And when we do that, that's the time when we could make that change.
Yes, absolutely.
So stay tuned on that one.
All right. Hanif is asking, once Android is available, will it have support for interfacing the phone sensors in the first release?
Paul?
I keep picking the ones I'm going to answer. That's weird. We do plan to have phone sensor support in the first release, yes. All righty. Julian has a question. I'm sorry, what was that, Jeff?
I mean, you want to give any details on that? Like what kind of...
yeah, that's true. I don't know. I can jump into details, but essentially we're going to map the same sensors that you get back from iOS currently. So if you look at the iOS motion class in the docs, you'll see there are sensors there for gravity, rotation, acceleration. So we'll have sensor support for all of those, depending on the device. So Android's a little different than iOS. Not all devices have all sensors. So you'll get data back for the sensors that are available on your device. Yeah,
Paul and I discovered that because we have our cheap Amazon Blue, well, it's not Amazon, but anyway, our Blue phones, and I guess they don't have all the sensors, right?
Yeah, they didn't have all of the sensors, no. All right, Julian has a question here. Will we be able to change themes, not just styles, in code at runtime? I presume this is referring to web. It was mentioned that changes could be done via the IDE in the video.
You can do it at design time. I'm not 100% sure. I think you can. I think that's the plan, that you could have more than one theme file. In fact, I'm almost certain that that's the plan. 95% confidence level. Because I remember Greg saying you could have multiple theme files, and the only reason to have multiple theme files would be if you could switch. Now, it may be, I don't know if you have to force a refresh or what. I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah. I think there's a very good chance of that. That's where I'll leave that.
All right. Carol is asking here, are the console apps used with the worker class compiled by the IDE and included in the app, or are they created at runtime by the app?
They are compiled when you build. So at the moment, I don't know if we'll change this, but at the moment, let's say you have one worker, your app builds and you see the worker build. Like you see the build dialog go by twice. That's at least what's going on right now. But yes, they're built at build time and then embedded into the package or the folder for Linux and Windows.
All right. I'm going to ask, let's see here. Well, I'm going to give you a fun question to noodle on while I go through the list some more. Gulio is asking, what's the sense of life?
What's the sense of life?
Well, I'm just going to scan the list.
5 senses that I use in life. So I think he was maybe asking, what is the meaning of life?
Yeah, perhaps, yeah.
And I've actually, 42, yes, Dirk, you're right. The answer to that question is 42. And if you don't know why the answer is 42, then you just haven't been in computing long enough.
Right, and yeah, we tend to use that number a lot for placeholders. If you look closely at the Android demo examples I showed, in the bottom corner of the IDE, it said release 42. That would be a lot of releases in 1 year. All right, Dirk has a question regarding workers, and will they be available on all platforms?
Yes. Well, wait, hang on. Let's back that up. They'll be available on all the desktop platforms. They will eventually be available for web projects, but not initially, because there's some extra engineering that has to go on for that to work the way you're going to want it to work for web projects. So the initial release of workers may not have support for web. I don't believe that, well, they can't work on iOS because
not with that design, no.
Yeah, the way they're designed, that wouldn't work. Doesn't mean they won't eventually. Just means the current design, let me say it a different way, the current implementation, because you're abstracted from the implementation. So the current implementation wouldn't work on iOS. I'm not sure about Android. Do you have any thoughts on Android, Paul, in terms of that?
No, I haven't really looked into that much. I don't think that we'd necessarily want to kick off a bunch of extra processes on Android, and it looks like there might be other options for the mobile devices.
Yeah, the way you do it on mobile is quite a bit different. So, but in terms of the desktop operating systems, and eventually, again, our web framework, it'll be supported there. Yeah.
All right. Fernando is asking, with the improvements that Web 2.0 will have, will this mean we'll be able to have more concurrent users in our app?
That's a good question. We'll have to do some testing. I would expect so, because the app's using about 50% less CPU. So I would expect that you'd get more. But we haven't tested, we haven't taken an app where we have a known quantity, of users and then ported that and tested that.
Right. Well, and certainly the load balancer will drop.
Oh, and the load balancer will help too. But he's talking about a single instance of the app. And yeah, in theory, yes, because the CPU usage is half that of Web Framework 1.0.
All righty. Let's see. Martin here is asking about the support of the graphics object in Xojo script. Is that an indicator that we will be able to use Xojo script for plugin creation in the future?
Well, that's not what it's for. You could use it in conjunction with that. The reason we created that feature in the first place was to allow people to write plugins to be able to, especially plugins if you write, or like custom classes. You can embed a Xojo script. You'll be able to embed a Xojo script into your custom class that the layout editor can then use at design time to draw your control. Instead of just having an icon there, you could actually, let's say it was some sort of grid control. You could draw the columns and rows and headers, all of that stuff. But we're not planning on using Xojo script as the basis for plugins written in Xojo. Plugins written in Xojo will just be written in normal Xojo.
Speaking of plugins, Dirk is asking if we have any plans to maybe improve the plugin loading speed for all platforms, because that can take a while even on powerful machines currently.
So sort of is the that's a little complicated. I don't think we're going to be able to change much how plugins are handled today. However, once you can write plugins in Xojo itself, and that could include a plugin in Xojo that then just calls out to a dynamic library, right, or a static library. Those plugins will be project specific, so you won't have a folder just filled with all these plugins that the IDE has to load. Instead, you'll be just dropping plugins into the project as you need them, which is also good for versioning and things like that. I've never liked the whole global plugins idea because, again, it just makes everything more difficult. The IDE has to load everything, takes up memory, hard to do versioning. But if you can drop a plugin into a project, then you have that version and you're not loading everything. We can unload them easily, etc.
All right, Martin here is asking, and this is probably going to be a question for me, how do you feel about this week virtual Zoom and Google Hangout sessions? Could you imagine to do this a couple times a month outside of XDC? He thought they were interesting.
Yeah, at least in terms of this kind of thing, I don't know if we could do this couple times
Well,
a
I
month.
was doing lunchtime. I think he's referring to the lunchtime things that I was doing earlier
Yeah,
in the
I
week.
mean,
But yeah, I do
pass that to
think,
you, Paul.
yeah, I do think that we will continue those for the short term at least, as long as interest remains. Enough people are interested, so that makes sense to keep doing them. So yeah, I don't know that I do them necessarily every day, but we'll start off next week with them continuing. Maybe a Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing to start. See how that goes. And I think I mentioned at a couple of them. Maybe we can turn them into some sort of lunchtime learning thing. So someone shows off some cool tip or tidbit or something, or maybe a new app they made or something like that. So while everyone's cooped up in their houses, this could be one way for us to at least chat with other people. So I'm happy with keeping it going.
I'm actually entering a poll question. Hang on.
Entering a poll. All right, well, while you're doing that, I'm going to continue to scan the list here.
Actually, I should say.
All right, well, while you're doing that, I'm gonna read a comment from Justin. It's not a question, and he's reminding people that in the interim for debugger watch points, don't forget that you can set things up as computed properties and set breakpoints in them, and that can be handy to get a watch point on when a property is accessed or its value is changed. So that is a good power user tip right there.
Okay, launched my first webinar poll. Yes was ahead, but now no is ahead. So I guess a lot
it says I can't vote.
There was a checkbox for panelists, but I know that you work from home, Paul. So
do you?
Yeah. Well, so far only about half the people have voted, so we'll leave that a little bit.
Okay,
got another
way.
question.
All right, so let's see here.
By the way, I love the fact that at the moment we have 42 participants.
Perfect. How could that have worked out any better? All right, I get a lot here regarding worker stuff, so I guess I'm going to just do them. Let's see here.
Well, actually, while you're looking over those, let me tell everybody here. So I know a lot of you are get the pre-releases. So we will have one soon, very soon. And we're making a little change this time. Well, I say this time. This is how we're changing how we're doing pre-releases. So namely, pre-releases will no longer have any sort of build status. They won't be alpha, beta, final candidate, nothing like that. They'll just have build numbers. And when we believe we're ready to ship, we'll ship whatever build we have. So don't expect to see an alpha, don't expect to see a beta, don't expect us to say we're getting ready to ship, so this is the final candidate. We will not be saying that. We have too many people that wait until final candidate to start testing, and so you're not going to know when we're going to ship. So do test early, test often.
All right, now on to worker. I'm going to hit a bunch of these in a row, it looks like. So Jim is asking regarding the worker class, what happens if the worker itself crashes?
That's a good question. I'm not sure what happens there, to be honest with you. I don't think I'm sure Travis would have an answer to that. In fact, let me ask him, and we'll come back to that question. Oh, Travis is here. It launches a replacement worker. Wow, that's great. I didn't even have to type the question. So there you go.
Right. I forgot Travis might be here.
Yeah, Travis says it launches a replacement worker, which is great. Awesome. If only businesses worked that way, when an employee crashed, and just suddenly another one just showed up and just kept going. That'd be
kept right where it left off. All right, so another worker question from Mike, asking a bit about the architecture. How or are resources going to be shared among workers? Not sure specifically.
I'm not sure what you mean by resources. The workers are console apps. They can access the file system. So I think that's kind of up to you. I would imagine that. I mean, each worker gets passed a string and passes a string back. So there's no sharing going on there, but you do have the file system. So if you wanted to share between workers, I suppose you could do that through the file system.
Julian is asking if the workers can be configured in any way to make sure that faster performing cores are picked over others.
There might be, I mean, it's possible that we might make some sort of optimization there in the future, but at this point, no. I think all the workers.
I don't know. Is that even relevant on desktop? Does a desktop CPU have different performing cores? I mean, generally they're all the same.
Well, I was wondering if he was meaning some cores just being busier than others.
Oh, so, well, that's kind of up to the OS to distribute.
Yeah, I think the OS
we're doing
kind of handles all that. Yeah. So that's beyond our pay grade.
I mean, I've seen mobile devices that have, some high-speed cores and some low-speed cores, but I haven't seen any desktops with that yet.
Yeah, and it's irrelevant, at least for now, on mobile. So,
Justin is asking if we might be doing a webinar on workers. We certainly might, once that's available.
But I will tell you, there's really not a whole lot more than what you saw in the video. I mean, they really are that simple. You subclass the worker or create a new worker for your project. You put in, some code to dole out the jobs in the job requested. The core of the processing, you put in job run, and then whatever you need to do in job completed to get the data back, count how many jobs you finished, update your progress bar, whatever. There's not a whole lot more to it than that. We may have a few more features before it ships, but there's really, not a whole lot more to it. That's the beauty of it, is we've taken something that is normally something that maybe less than 1% of our users would ever even mess around with, and made it something that any user can use. So it's meant to be simple.
All right, so here's a question from Carol regarding PDF document. You showed the creation of a PDF from a graphics object. Does doing it that way, is the PDF searchable or is it an image?
No, it is not an image. It is searchable. All the text is there. In fact, Javier reminded me that if you have a PDF editing app, you can edit the text after the fact. And the graphics all scale. It's not one image. There's individual graphics. So you can zoom in and the clarity stays the whole way. I didn't show that, I don't think, in the example, because it was a bar chart, so everything, But anyway, yeah, it's good stuff.
That also answers a question from Tim. So you got 2 for 1 right there.
All right.
That one. All right.
By the way, update on our poll. 64% of you have voted, and it looks like about 2/3 of you are still working from. Let's see. The question was, are you working from home right now, but normally work from an office? And 1/3 of you said yes, you're working from home, although you normally work from an office. And the other 2/3, I guess, always work from home, because that's the way I'm interpreting that anyway. I can't imagine there's too many people going into the office these days. So.
All right, Martin is asking about, you mentioned that regex will be available for iOS. Will this also involve any updates to the desktop side?
It might. We'll see.
All right. Mike is asking a good question related to your explanation of pre-releases earlier. How do you get access to early releases?
Well, if you have Xojo Pro or Pro Plus, then on the forum, we have a pre-release channel, and you'll have access to that, and that's where we provide pre-releases.
All right. Here's one from Carol that I'm going to ask you, even though I know you won't answer it.
Okay.
Out of the things Geoff talked about in his video, what ones are going to be in 2020 R1? I guess there's a couple things you can say there, maybe one.
Well, there's one I can say with certainty, and that is the Web Framework 2.0 will be in R1. So there are other things that may be in R1, but we have to. I'll say that I can say something that I know will be in the pre-release, and I presume it will be in R1 if it tests out and is ready, and that is a PDF document. It will be in R1. But again, something could come up during testing, and we find out it's not ready. I can't imagine that happening because we've tested it quite a bit already internally, but you never know.
All right, Ed is asking in regards to the Web 2.0 video. One of the demos Greg showed had a list box on the left with fields on the right, and the fields were populated as the list box rows were clicked. Is this by any chance data binding, or is it still coded?
No, it's still coded. There's no data binding there yet. We want it. Our roadmap has data binding on it, but we don't have that yet.
Martin asks, Apple separated iOS a couple of years ago into iOS and iPad OS. Does this make any difference to Xojo's iOS support?
Not really.
Yeah, I haven't seen how it does yet either. Not even sure why Apple did it, to be honest.
I don't want to say it's a branding thing. Travis may have a comment on that. In fact, I see him typing in Teams, so I think there's a comment brewing. It's a marketing separation, yeah, and that's what I thought too. It's mostly marketing because they release. I believe the updates always come out simultaneously, and so.
Julian asks if the workers get rebuilt if there have been no changes to their code.
Well, right now I'm sure we're building them every time, but I would expect at some point we will make it so that if the code doesn't change, we don't rebuild them. That would certainly make sense.
Right. Yeah, I imagine the incremental compiler still kicks in there too. So.
Right. Well, this is a little different though because the code is, we have to put it in another project.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm not sure.
Say we tried that.
Yeah, they may for a while they may get rebuilt every time, but I mean, I'm not sure how much code is going to end up being in one of those things, right? So I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
All right, sorry, just scrolling. Hanif asks, with Web 2.0, will my previous Web 1.0 web container controls have to be rewritten, or can I just port them to Web 2.0 directly? Well,
the controls themselves, like the layouts and the controls on the layouts, that will all be imported. And, then you'll, as Greg mentioned in his video, most of the controls in Web 2.0 are a little bigger, so you'll probably have to tweak your layouts a little bit. We don't touch your code. We'll bring it all in and we'll put it in the right events, but we don't change any of it. So assuming that you just have a container control and you've got a bunch of code in it and buttons and stuff and you've got code, you may have to update some of that code because it's all API 2.0. So the old methods from API 1.0 that have been replaced won't be there the way they are on the desktop. So you'll have to hit run and get your errors and fix your errors. But yeah.
All right, Dirk is asking if for Xojo Connect we were going to have a app contest. I think it was called Appity App.
Appity App, yeah.
And he's asking if that's something we might still be considering to do online at some point.
We are. I need to check back with Dana on that. You might want to send an email to Dana. We did talk about it, and I think she is planning on doing it. I don't remember what the last status of that was. So fire off an email to Dana and Alyssa is saying stay tuned. So there you go. That's the official answer from Alyssa. Stay tuned. That's a definite maybe.
Doesn't get any more maybe than that, does it? Doug is asking about workers and the ability to use shared memory between them.
I wouldn't count on that. I mean, I would not count on that. In fact, Yeah, I just would not count on that.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're totally separate apps, so
yeah, they're separate apps. I don't see how that would work. But the other thing is, okay, so that's a solution to a problem. So the real problem is, hey, I want to share data between workers. Well, that's the case. That you've got access to the file system, so you can write all that stuff to a file and have the other worker, pick it up and things like that. Now, Travis is pointing out. Let me just see what his comment is. He says, not in version 1. Who knows what the future will hold as far as sharing data between, basically what I said. So we're not ruling it out at some point, but definitely not in the first version. Remember, this is a term I think you're all familiar with, minimally viable product, right? So we want to get out the simplest version that is useful to a lot of people, and then we'll incrementally improve from there.
All right. Justin is asking if we've considered tweaking the Raspberry Pi license to allow essentially it to save as text so that more people could use that with open source projects more easily. Yeah,
it's tricky. The whole text thing is really tricky because just from a business point of view, if you can use text with a license, that means you can use version control. And for a lot of teams, that would mean, well, we'll just have everybody use the free version and we'll have one guy do all the building. And we obviously, our business model is not designed for that. So probably not is the answer there.
I'm going to ask you a question you already answered because I got a couple other people that maybe missed it because they're asking regarding the PDF support. And is that generating as graphics or text or vector or what?
Yeah, it is. I believe it's vector, but the text is text. You can open a PDF that you create in like PDF Pen, for example, on a Mac, and you can edit the text. So it's text. And the graphics, I'm pretty sure are vector because when I open one up and zoom in, the resolution is there, right? It doesn't become pixelated. So it's not an image, it's actual. Yeah.
Hanif is asking if we have any plans to rewrite the Xojo forum using Xojo Web 2.0.
No, we have no plans to do that. Yeah. And Javier has just confirmed real text graphics are vectors. Except for pictures, of course. Picture can't be. Yeah.
All right. Jeremy is asking about iOS. You may have mentioned in your video about local notifications for iOS, and he's asking if we have anything that we can talk about regarding remote notifications.
Nothing we can talk about. How's that?
I'm sure Jeremy loves that answer. All right, and Justin wants to have a follow-up to his Pi question. He was, let's see here. Is it possible to pay more than the $99 to include support for source code?
There is.
This is the free one, yeah.
Yeah, you can pay $300 and get a desktop license, and then you have that ability. So there's your answer. You can do that today. We don't have to change anything.
Right. Well, Martin is asking regarding forum. Did you have any news or update regarding the Flarum forum, which I think you talked about last year?
Yeah, we're still looking at that. It takes some time to make that conversion, and so that's, I don't want to quite say backburnered, but we're still looking into that. I definitely want to upgrade from EsoTalk. It's just a matter of, when the right time is going to be to do that. So.
Ed has a generic question here. It says, is remote debugging still available?
It is.
But yeah, we haven't changed anything regarding that. So I don't know if you have a more specific follow-up, feel free to ask. But yeah, remote debugging hasn't gone away. Still super useful.
But do maintain social distance when you're remote debugging.
Yeah. Right. Run your VMs on another computer or something.
Right.
Julian asks a general question regarding the current worldwide situation. Are you concerned about coronavirus pandemic on the future of Xojo in any way you care to talk about?
No, we were, I don't want to use hyperbole and say we were very uniquely prepared, but everyone at Xojo has been working from home for 12 years. So we're very used to this sort of thing. We're all keenly aware. Some of us have kids, schools are closed. My son who's in high school yesterday started online lessons, and I told him to expect to not be going back to school for the rest of the school year, to which he exclaimed quite loudly how happy he was about that because he hates school. He likes learning. He doesn't like school. So no, I think we're not too concerned about that. We're all healthy and very prepared and being careful, following the prescribed guidelines and things like that. So far so good.
All right, back to Worker, the topic of the day, apparently.
Yeah, clearly.
Ed is asking, so he's making sure that he understands Worker is essentially a console app that you feed it data and it returns data. That is correct. So while the Worker is running, does it have access to anything in the main app at all?
It does not.
No, it does not.
Yeah. The whole point is you guys, what we've heard from Xojo users is, I want multi-core support and I want to be able to write my code and not have to worry about anything going wrong, and it just works. And generally speaking, that's not how it works in the world of most languages. You have to watch yourself very, very closely. And as I mentioned, a lot of frameworks aren't thread safe. Console or GUI frameworks and operating systems aren't thread safe. So by making these siloed, making it so that the workers are in an absolute silo in their own application and carefully controlling the flow of data between the console and the application, we give you this super easy thing where you can do whatever you want in your code, and you can go at it and not have to worry because that sort of intermingling can't happen. So it does mean that you're going to have to be, you have to think through exactly how you're going to pass it, what you're going to pass back and forth. And over time, I'm sure we'll add some more features as we see how you use it and how we use it. We've already got plans, by the way, to use workers inside the IDE itself. So once we finally ship this, we may start doing that. So it's a feature that will, definitely improve over time, like a fine wine.
Speaking of maybe a worker feature that could improve over time, Julian is asking if it might be possible that there is some way for the main app to be notified when a worker, hang on, let me read that again. If the worker crashes and a new worker spawns, does the main app get notified? Yeah. So is there a way for the main app to know if a worker was terminated for some reason?
I don't think there is right now, but we could certainly add that because we would know we're firing up a replacement. So I'd expect if that becomes important, then I'm sure we could make that possible. And we could add an event, for example, that we just fire just so that that happened, perhaps.
Christian offers that perhaps we should use workers to pre-compile plugins to maybe help speed up that loading. Interesting tip.
That's not a bad idea.
Steve asks if the workers are persistent processes that can be interacted with, or are they only intended for parallelizable tasks? And well, that's the end of the question.
No, they're really meant for parallelizable tasks. I mean, I suppose if you constructed the job run event in a way where it could do lots of different things, and the string told it which type of job to do, I guess maybe, but they're really meant to do a parallelizable task. Parallelizable, yeah, in parallel.
And Mike is asking, will we be able to debug workers?
Will you? Okay, so yeah, so I thought I covered this in the keynote, but anyway, when you run your code, when you're running from the IDE, we don't build the console apps. It's all running in the main thread. So if it's a question of your logic, just making sure your logic works, you debug it the way you do today. Now, once you build, of course, then you get console apps, but it shouldn't change. The behavior of your code shouldn't change. If you have, well, Travis and I talked about this several weeks ago. And we agreed that if you find yourself needing to debug the console apps at build time, or at runtime rather, something's wrong, because you really should not have to do that.
All right, Martin has a question. This is kind of Android-ish regarding declare support and what options might be available there. I briefly touched on this in a Hangout, perhaps one of the ones Martin was at, which is why he's asking the question. And I don't want to say we're not going to have declare support in the first version, but we just really haven't looked into that to have an answer for what we're going to do just yet, and whether it would be declare support like you're used to seeing on the other platforms, or if it'd be some other technique for interfacing with OS level type things. So we really want to have something there because that's a great way to extend when we when we don't provide everything to start with. It's a great way to extend things. So we really want to have something there, but what we're going to have, I don't have anything I can tell you about at this point. All right. And to confirm, you said workers will not initially be available for web apps. That
correct? Not initially. We have some. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. What I will say is that there is some work that has to be done to make them work with web apps that has not been done yet.
Right.
Is
so
it possible?
The design should be compatible with it.
Right. So it could be that by the time we ship workers, we've done that extra work for web apps. I'm just not sure where that will fall. So I can't tell you if the release that includes those will have that there or not. We'd certainly like it to be there. We want it to be available for web apps. I just can't be sure. If I could see that far in the future and make that kind of guarantee, I'd be in a different kind of business.
Again, back to workers, Steve is asking if it'll be possible to create additional event definitions for workers. Not really sure what that would mean myself. But.
Not in the first version. Whether or not that'll be possible in a future release is hard to say at this point.
Let's see. Based on your background, Dirk is asking if you're going to be ending the Q&A with a guitar solo from that guitar that's behind you.
You don't want to hear a guitar solo by me. I'm a drummer, so I could.
Surprised they let you own a guitar.
Yeah, well, I have taught I've taught myself to play the guitar. I just don't play it very well because I don't spend enough time. Though I did. Long ago, our lead guitarist was complaining about the intro to "Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress" by the Hollies, and I taught myself how to play it just to show him that it's not that hard. But I am a drummer, and I've got a drum set in the next room. So if I was going to end this thing with anything, we'd have to go in there for a drum solo. But we won't be doing that today. So.
All right. There's a couple questions in here that are asking, what libraries we use for things that we're building. And I don't think we really talk about that at this point. So I'm going to just skip over those questions, but just letting people know we saw those.
Well, and let me just give you a generic answer there. You can figure it out by looking at the license readmes and stuff, but that doesn't tell you anything because you don't necessarily know what parts of the library we're exposing, what features we're adding. Like the library that we based PDF on, for example, you would know almost nothing by knowing what library it was because Abier's done a lot of work on top of that that wasn't part of the library. It was just a base for him to start with, and that's all. So.
Looks like one last worker-related thing here. Have we considered having the workers share the libs folder amongst themselves?
Well, I mean, again, the workers have access to the file system. So.
Well, I think that's more talking about the build process because there's a you could probably end up with a smaller app.
Like the runtime, for example.
Yeah, the runtimes.
Yeah, in theory, I mean, that's possible. Travis is typing, so I think we're going to get an answer on that. 1 second. I mean, it seems like we could put the runtime in there and not include it in the worker apps, but because they certainly would all be the same version. But he's still typing, so apparently this is not a simple answer. And the answer is there's only one worker executable for each one you put in the app. We think many apps will just have one or two. Oh, well, yeah. So basically what he's saying is, there's only one executable for the worker. We launch many instances of that, but there's only one console app per worker. So you'd have to have, a lot of them before you'd really get much of a savings of that. But you know what? If we find out that everybody seems to have 5, then we might do that. Yes, and he says there's nothing stopping multiple sharings, multiples sharing the same libraries.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, I think we've reached about the end here. So we got one fun question for you to wrap up with. It doesn't mean anything to me, but Steve is asking you if you are a Bob Schneider fan, Austin fixture, musician of some kind.
No, I think he's a comedian. If he's the Bob Schneider I'm thinking of, from that comedy, what's it called? Was it Home Improvement? No, that's not the same one. Hang on.
Steve says he's a musician.
A musician. Yeah, now I kind of heard, Austin. Okay, well, apparently he is a Austin staple, and Dana's telling me that in all caps, which means that he really wants to make sure I know that. But no, I've lived in Austin since 1994, and I don't really follow the local Austin music scene. I've never been to South by South. I've never been to ACL, the Austin Music Festival that's here, which is kind of amazing. I think that's sort of like living in LA and having never been to Dodger Stadium. So I don't really follow that much. Having said that, though, when I was a teenager, a buddy of mine gave me this album to listen to, and it was this young guy who was about our age. He was 16 when he recorded the album. His name was Charlie Sexton. And it was a great album. In fact, he had a bit part in the movie Thelma and Louise, if you saw that. Anyway, so I really love the album. Fast forward, 30 years or something, and I'm in Dallas. I'm flying back from somewhere, and often flights go through Dallas. Dallas is American Airlines hub. And plane's full, except for the seat in front of me. And right at the last second, this guy stumbles onto the plane with a guitar case. He stows the guitar case. He sits down in the seat in front of me. I see him coming down the aisle. And I'm like, man, that looks like Charlie Sexton, the guy whose album I got when I was a teenager. So he sits down. I tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, "Are you Charlie Sexton?" He said, "Yeah, I am." I said, "Oh, why are you going to Austin?" And he said, "I live in Austin." So and it turned out he just came out with new albums, which I went and got. He was going to be playing downtown that summer. Went and saw him a couple of times. Great album. Anyway, that small world. Well, a woman who lived across the street from us moved to South Austin. And we kind of kept in touch because we were friends. And I think about 5 years after she moved down there, she ended up marrying Charlie Sexton. So that's my local musician story. Bob Schneider thought he was a comedian on television.
Right. So that's a long answer for no.
Very short question.
So I think we'll wrap things up now. And
thank Rob Schneider. That's not even the one I was thinking of, by the way. There's the guy who did that show that was really wholesome. He's a comedian. Dana's Wheels Are Turning. Not Rob Schneider. Bob Saget. That's who I'm thinking of. Bob Saget. Bob Schneider, Bob Saget. Yeah.
It doesn't seem too connected, but
yeah. Well, Bob,
So anyway, we're wrapping up, as you can gather, with the senseless talk here at the end.
That's right.
So thank you everyone for attending. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be doing some Hangouts next week, so stay on top of the forum for links to that if you're still inclined to hang out and chat about topics that can or may not include Xojo. Anything you want to add, Geoff?
Yeah, if you enjoyed this, make sure you talk about it on the forum. That will certainly encourage us to do this more often. So the more you guys talk it up, the more often we're likely to do it. So,
all right,
and
thanks,
yes,
all.
to all of you, keep safe as well. Ed?
Keep safe and try to enjoy your weekend.
Yep.
Bye, all.
Bye.